And Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine, but Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun. The law is sacred.
What kind of character makes the audience hate him so much that they wish for his swift demise, even to the point where some viewers curse outright? This also demonstrates that the director has done an excellent job in shaping this character. Chuck is exactly such a person. Although he is highly respected in the legal world and is a standout in the industry, his jealousy has distorted his entire being. This ultimately leads to a bitter fallout between the brothers, with mutual destruction being their inevitable fate. Because Jimmy was suspended by the Bar Association for a year, his insurance premium for the next year has increased significantly. To balance his emotions, Jimmy deliberately revealed Chuck's condition and his behavior in court. Soon, the insurance company arrived at HHM law firm to notify them of the premium increase, which affected all the firm's lawyers, doubling their insurance costs. Even more dramatically, Chuck's upcoming work had to be supervised by a partner at all times. Hearing this, Chuck angrily ended the conversation.
The insurance industry is heavily regulated. I can think of a dozen infractions right here off the top of my head.
Mr. McGill.
You're hoping we'll either find another carrier or cut you an enormous check. Win-win for you. I assure you, neither is going to happen. What will happen is very simple. You're going to do right by us, or we will compel you to do so.
What do you mean by compel?
You know exactly what I mean.
If you're threatening litigation, I'm afraid this meeting is over.
Then it's over.
After the insurance company's staff left, Howard considerately turned off the lights for Chuck, then brought a glass of wine to have a heartfelt chat. Howard mentioned knowing a retired lawyer who teaches at a university, who would be delighted to have Chuck help with teaching. Howard's implication was clear. Chuck could retire early, which was a heavy blow for Chuck. Howard always prioritized the firm's interests above all. Chuck thought Howard was concerned about his health, so he quickly turned on the lights to prove himself.
Howard, I'm fine!
This is not what fine looks like. I can't be partners with someone whose judgment I don't trust.
Realizing that further discussion was pointless, Chuck left without looking back. Meanwhile, to check on the progress of the Sandpiper crossing case, Jimmy brought Irene's favorite cookies to visit her. After a few probing questions, Jimmy learned that the case would take several more years, meaning his commission would also be delayed by several years. Although the commission would be a substantial income, it couldn't solve Jimmy's immediate financial crisis. Trusting Jimmy, Irene handed over all the documents related to the case to him. Just as Jimmy was thinking of ways to guide Irene to expedite the case, Irene's friends suddenly invited her to join them for a workout. Seeing familiar faces, they warmly invited Jimmy to join as well. But at this critical moment, Jimmy had no time for exercise, so he politely declined with a casual excuse. After leaving Sandpiper Crossing, Jimmy calculated that he could get over $1 million in commission, which instantly filled him with joy. To expedite the case, Jimmy confronted Howard, accusing them of dragging their feet, which was detrimental to the client's interests. Howard, not being naive, saw through Jimmy's urgency to get his payout and humiliated him harshly.
All you care about is your share of the payout. It's like talking to Gollum. You're transparent and pathetic. You want a handout? Here. Next time, why don't you bring a tin cup?
Since Jimmy and Kim had humiliated Chuck in court, tarnishing HHM's reputation, Howard viewed Jimmy as an enemy. Jimmy's subsequent actions confirmed Howard's suspicions. Jimmy began pushing the case forward in his own way, pretending to work out and running into Irene at the mall. After spouting a lot of nonsense, Jimmy showed off his new shoes to Irene and asked if she liked them. They were obviously high-end sneakers for seniors, and it was impossible not to like them. Jimmy said he bought a pair for his girlfriend, but they didn't fit and the store wouldn't take them back. He asked for Irene's shoe size, but no matter what she said, Jimmy had the right size because he had bought every size. They fit Irene perfectly, and she was thrilled, but she insisted she couldn't take them for free. Jimmy mentioned he did need a small favor. He asked her not to tell anyone that the shoes were from him, or they would feel left out. Irene promised to keep it a secret. With everything set, Jimmy began to deliberately sow discord between Irene and her friends.
And the truth is, if Irene settles, he'd get some money. But, I mean, it's not like you guys need it, right? On the other hand, I did get a look at their offer. I don't want to speak out of school, but it's, But, I mean, hey, everyone's situation is different. Maybe Irene just doesn't need the money. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but Or you see someone buying nice new things,
Like those shoes.
like those shoes.
After Jimmy's provocations, Irene was soon isolated by her sisters. In a game orchestrated by Jimmy, he deliberately ensured that Irene won in a bingo game, but not a single person applauded for her. Poor Irene couldn't hold back her tears and left in distress. Cunning Jimmy pretended to comfort her, and Irene confided her frustrations to him. This gave Jimmy the perfect opportunity to bring up the Sandpiper crossing case. Jimmy pretended to guess that maybe they wanted to get the settlement money as soon as possible to improve their lives, and that you as a representative should consider their needs. After all his efforts, Jimmy finally achieved his goal. Meanwhile, through Kevin from Mesa Verde Bank, Kim met a new client. The oil tycoon had been embroiled in a border dispute over his oil drilling and had sought help from several lawyers to no avail. However, during her first visit, Kim resolved the boss's problem, making her confident about securing this major case. After the client left, Kim quickly recorded her strategy ideas on a voice memo, but as she prepared to leave, her car got stuck in the sand. In such situations, most drivers would call the just departed client for help, but the independent Kim insisted on solving it herself. She would never trouble someone else for something she could do alone, but her solo efforts were limited, and her car nearly hit the fence. After an all-night effort, Kim organized all the materials for the new case by early the next morning. Just as she was rushing to defend the case, Jimmy arrived with a bottle of rare sapphire gin, wanting to celebrate with Kim, but Kim was too busy to pay him any attention. Jimmy mentioned that he was about to receive his payout from the Sandpiper crossing case, surprising Kim since the case hadn't been settled yet. Jimmy told her not to worry about those details. He also feels that his behavior is not acceptable, but no matter what, the money is coming soon. Isn't it worth celebrating? Despite Jimmy's insistence, the already late Kim didn't have time to raise a glass. Reluctantly, Jimmy shared his triumph with his assistant Francesca. On her way, Kim continuously rehearsed her defense speech for the client. Kim is so focused on getting her first win on a new case that she forgets she's still driving. Fortunately, Kim didn't lose her life in the accident, but unfortunately, the case she had prepared overnight would be delayed. Rushing to the scene, Jimmy was heartbroken to see Kim, but their understanding was unspoken. That evening, Jimmy took Kim back to the accident site, picking up the scattered materials. After all, it was the result of Kim's all-night effort. After this ordeal, Jimmy realized that the main reason for Kim's accident was the immense pressure and her relentless drive. Kim pushed herself so hard to ensure their firm's survival. In order to ease Kim's burden, Jimmy decided to sublet the firm, and was going to fire Francesca. This clearly showed how important Kim was to Jimmy. On the other hand, Howard received a letter from Chuck. He thought it was Chuck's resignation letter, so he arranged his secretary to prepare a grand farewell ceremony. However, Howard was infuriated when he read the contents of the letter.
God damn it, Chuck. You're suing Hamlin McGill.
To prove that he was healthy, Chuck had turned on every appliance in his house. Howard scolded Chuck for his selfish behavior, but Chuck reminded him that he was a founding partner of the firm and had mentored Howard through his bar exam. If Howard wanted him gone, he would have to pay. Chuck knew that HHM couldn't afford his buyout fee at the moment. After Howard left, the deceitful Chuck couldn't hold back any longer. Turns out it was all an act he put on for Howard, but Howard wouldn't let Chuck get away with it. And the next day the firm held a shareholders meeting to settle Chuck's affairs. Because Chuck has turned his job as a lawyer into his whole life, he can't accept that he lost his job. Chuck thought his plan had succeeded, and he declared that if no one objected, they could act like nothing happened, and he would forgive and forget. Reconciling with everyone, Howard asked the other partners to leave the conference room temporarily. Then he took a check out of his pocket and handed it to Chuck. He preferred to pay out of his own pocket to fire Chuck, because Howard knew Chuck wasn't putting the firm's interests first but only cared about his own. In the end, Chuck left the firm he had built with everyone bidding him farewell.
Everybody, thank you for gathering. I have some bittersweet news to share. I'm sorry to say, but our fearless leader, Charles McGill, will be leaving HHM, effective immediately. I want to take this moment to thank Chuck for everything he's done for HHM. We started off with 6 employees, and Chuck helped grow us into one of the largest firms in the state. We will be forever grateful for his dedication. Do you have anything you want to say? All right then, let's give him a hand.
Meanwhile, the injured Kim still hadn't forgotten about work. Francesca said Kim was lucky because she often saw people die in accidents at that intersection. Francesca's casual remark made Kim reassess her life. Realizing that nothing else mattered compared to being alive, Kim canceled her meeting with the oil tycoon client and asked Francesca to accompany her in buying a lot of DVDs. She decided to relax at home for a while. Affected by this life and death incident, Jimmy also began to worry about his brother Chuck. Although Jimmy felt conflicted, he mustered up the courage to knock on Chuck's door. When Jimmy arrived at Chuck's house, he saw that all the electrical appliances were working normally. Jimmy felt happy for Chuck. Out of familial love, Jimmy wanted to reconcile with Chuck and repent for his actions. However, Chuck was cold, as he had just lost his beloved job and blamed Jimmy for it. Chuck pointed out all of Jimmy's flaws and said there was no need to reconcile because Jimmy had never been that important to him. This was like a sword piercing Jimmy's heart. He fell silent and prepared to leave. At the door, Jimmy wanted to say something more to Chuck, but seeing Chuck's cold demeanor, he left heartbroken. This blow undoubtedly had a profound impact on Jimmy. Next, Jimmy went to Irene to inquire about the Sandpiper crossing settlement, but to his surprise, the settlement money had not yet arrived. Because Irene had not yet reconciled with her friends, Jimmy approached the others to try to make amends for his mistakes, but a broken mirror cannot be easily restored. As Chuck had said, Jimmy hurts those around him, and now it was difficult for him to repair the damaged relationships. When the gloomy Jimmy returned home, Kim immediately saw that he had hit a wall. Jimmy complains to Kim about his confusion, but complaining wouldn't solve anything, so they decided to relax and watch their favorite movie. Just then, a spark of inspiration struck Jimmy's mind with a solution to the problem, though it required sacrificing his own image. Early the next morning, Jimmy went to the Sandpiper Crossing nursing home. Under the guise of a substitute instructor, he led the elderly residents in their morning exercises. At that moment, Erin, Jimmy's former colleague from DM law firm, showed up. She was currently handling the Sandpiper Crossing case. Pretending it was urgent, Erin demanded to talk to Jimmy immediately, which was all part of Jimmy's prearranged script. Jimmy had Erin lead him into admitting that he had manipulated Irene's relationships with her friends, and he purposely left the microphone on. Their conversation was clearly heard by the old people. After the performance, Jimmy returned to the room and pretended to forget to turn off the microphone, making his act even more convincing to the elderly residents. Jimmy paid a hefty price to make amends for his wrongdoings. After all this, Jimmy and Kim's WM law firm is declared broken and their only employee, Francesca, is fired. Jimmy apologized and promised that if he opened another law firm, he would call her first. He kept his promise, as Francesca remained his assistant throughout Breaking Bad. As they left, Jimmy and Kim were a bit sad to leave. After all, this was their first law firm.
We'll get another.
A better wall.
Meanwhile, after Jimmy left, Chuck's symptoms began to relapse. He turned off all the switches in the electrical box, but even lying in bed, he still couldn't sleep. The next day, Chuck discovered that the electric meter was still running even though he wasn't using any electricity. Calling for a repair would take 2 days. To find the source of the electrical use, Chuck removed all the light bulbs, but the meter kept running. Because Chuck now felt like he had nothing, he tried to get his life together and go back to work, but it didn't work out that way. All these reasons drove Chuck to the edge. He went crazy searching for the source of the electricity leak, punching holes in perfectly good walls, not sparing even the tiled ones, and even dismantling the bookshelf. Finally, Chuck found a hidden wire inside the wall, but when he went out to check the meter again, it was still running. This broke Chuck completely. He took a baseball bat and smashed the meter. Ultimately, feeling utterly hopeless, Chuck chose to end his life in solitude at home. Looking back on Chuck's life, he had achieved class transitions through his own efforts, which gave him a sense of achievement and at the same time made him a bit arrogant and conceited. Coupled with intense jealousy, Chuck was destined for an unhappy life. If one cannot recognize and correct their own flaws in time, tragedy is inevitable. Better Call Saul Season 3 ends with Chuck's departure. The upcoming Season 4 promises to be even more exciting. Fans, be sure to like and follow so you don't miss any of the thrilling plot.